Oh, hello everyone. It's Constance, and of course, you know the culture. It's Speak Cipher, and today with me is our dear host.
Ayo.
Okay, so everyone, yeah, we've got someone that's really conversant, someone that's passionate about diversity and inclusion, and
My name is Ruth Conte. I born in Nigeria, moved here when I was about 7, 8. And so you're probably wondering the surname Conte, where's that from? Well, I'm married to a Sierra Leonean. So our household is mixed ethnicities, as I'd like to call them, mixed culture. Yeah, very African, very West African, mixed culture. And so my children are half Nigerian, half Sierra Leonean, which is quite a lovely mix. Having done, I don't know, 10 plus years in reward, so pay and performance, I moved into diversity and inclusion about 18 months, 2 years ago. And so that's a brief picture of my career. But prior to joining financial services, I actually thought I was going to be a lawyer. And I did an undergrad, went to law school, got called to the Bar of England and Wales. My parents still have my picture with my wig on my head. And I'm pretty sure right up till like my dad dying, he used to tell people all the time, yeah, my daughter's a barrister.
Yeah.
No, not just a lawyer, darling. My daughter's a barrister. And he'll point at the picture. And I used to have to be like, firstly, I don't practice. I never have. Therefore, I'm not sure I'd call myself a barrister. But it's just one of those things where, as you tell people, they're just like, oh, yeah. So he enjoyed the status more so than I did. I tell you that for nothing. But yeah, so that's me in a nutshell.
Let's speak diversity and inclusion within organizations.
Now, I'll be honest with you. I can't tell you that I was always passionate about that specific topic. In fact, growing up in kind of southeast of London, I went to quite a diverse school, secondary school, primary school. Actually, we grew up in Bermondsey, which was very, very white. And there was a very low socioeconomic kind of, in terms of wealth, there wasn't much wealth. But the result of that was racism was very, very vast. And I remember my first experience of being bullied because I was Black. I must have been only like 8. So I literally had just arrived. And there was a specific boy in my class who used to make fun of my name, but like he used to taunt me. And in my class at the time in primary school, there were 5 Black girls in a class of 30.
Yeah.
Right. And so in terms of growing up, for a season of my life, I literally was like a minority. Now, when it was time for me to choose what secondary school I wanted to go to, there was this specific school. The school I ended up in doesn't exist anymore, sadly. At the time, the deputy head teacher was a Black woman, and I fell in love with this school. And I remember saying to my mum, that's the school I'm going to go to. And she said, but it's miles away. It was, of all the schools I applied to, it was the furthest away. It was going to take me over an hour to get there every day. And I insisted I was going to go to that school. And in the end, that was the school I ended up going to. And actually being in that environment where in the years that I was in that school, I definitely was not a minority. I was in the majority. And actually, after a couple of months of me, I was in year 7, the lady who had been the deputy head teacher actually became the head teacher.
Oh.
So I had a Black
head teacher,
leader, woman.
Really, yeah.
And actually, it did something to me. And I'd like to say it did something to most of the young ladies that were at the school at the time, in that it gave, at least for me, gave me a sense of belonging, a sense of, oh, actually I can make it in life. There is this person who is doing a fantastic job leading us. And whilst I was in that school, I think I must have been like in year 9, the Queen came to our school. Oh. So yeah, God bless her, as she's laid to rest. But yeah, I met the Queen at about 13, 14 years old, because she was taken in by our school. And she was like, wow.
Was it because of the diversity in the school?
I think it was the diversity in the school. One of the things that became apparent was because of that diversity, we were really big on music. And so we had a gospel choir that literally went around the world performing.
Yeah.
And I think the Queen had heard the gospel choir at the time performing, maybe at the Royal Albert Hall or something. And then they wrote, our head teacher, like, we love what we saw. The Queen would love to visit. And it was like one of the biggest things. And I remember after we left, like, Will Smith came to the school, but like we always had different
celebrities.
people.
Yeah,
honestly, we always had different people coming to the school, and I think what it did for us was it opened up our mindset on the art of the possible. And so for a really long time, kind of post primary school, as I got into secondary school, I literally stopped thinking about, oh, I'm a Black person. Like, that wasn't the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah.
I was a woman first. Yes, I was a Black woman, but being Black didn't necessarily feel like something that held me back until. And so I continued the journey, I went into another school for sixth form. And I think that was the kind of next time where I started to feel a sense of unease about, am I being treated differently, or is this just in my mind?
Yeah.
And, I don't even necessarily know why. I didn't necessarily want to put everything down to
racism. Yeah.
Or, it's because I'm a woman. It's because just work harder was kind of the messaging that had been imbibed in me. And so when I got to that secondary school, thankfully I was only there for 2 years. It was a difficult 2 years. Graduated, went to university. University, had a great time. University of Aston, woo woo. Had a great time at uni, and actually graduated with the first class. And
that's the law degree.
No, that wasn't the law degree. I did a different undergrad. I have a combined honours in computing and politics. And incidentally, I didn't want to do the computing, but that was the one that pushed me into the first. Okay. Why I'm not in tech right now, don't ask. Don't ask.
Are you still going to go back into tech?
Yeah.
You've been thinking about it. We've talked about it already today, isn't it? Yeah.
Maybe I should go back to tech. But when I finished uni, I came out with a first class degree. And your question was, how did I get into my first role? Yeah. When I finished uni, I'm just looking for work between uni and law school. Okay. And at the time, a lovely lady that worked at a big international bank was looking for just someone to come and cover for the summer. And she got my CV and she was like, you've barely got any experience, but I really like you, so come. And so I spent my summer working with her, Black woman, lovely Charmaine. Like, honestly, I probably wouldn't be in financial services, and I probably wouldn't be in HR if not for that exposure and that opportunity.
How did you meet her again?
Just through a recruitment agency.
Yeah.
So I had my CVs out with recruitment agencies. She interviewed me and she just took a liking to me.
Good.
That was really it. And she was like, you got a first class degree. No, actually, at the point of interviewing, I didn't even know I had a first class degree at that point. It was kind of through the course of that summer that it became apparent that, I got a first class.
Yeah.
But yeah, she just took a liking to me, and I went to work with her that summer, and she worked in like the development space for graduates. So she was doing graduate recruitment, graduate development. So when you get a cohort, a class into a graduate year, they usually plan things for them for the first kind of, I'd say, 2 months. Okay. So they'd have classes, they'd have courses to kind of bring them up to speed on the working environment. So whilst they might have a degree, there are other skills that they'll need to succeed in that space. So I was helping managing that cohort. Now, mind you, that cohort were also my age because we were all part of the same graduating class.
Yeah.
And I remember a member of that class didn't show up, and she had offered me a grad role. And I was like, no, I don't want it. I'm going to law school. And I look back and I always kick myself, like, why did you say no?
You did. Yeah.
Like, I just, and this is life, right? You don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And as I look back, I think because the plan was always to be a lawyer.
Okay.
Mom and dad wanted you to be a lawyer.
I'd say dad wanted me to be a lawyer. Mum was just like, do whatever God says you should do with your life. That's my mum's perspective. But dad was like, be a lawyer. And, you know, my parents were migrants into this country, and they look around them. And so they both maybe had primary school education, and that was kind of it. And so for them, it was like, education is key. And then it was that trajectory of, well, what could you do? You could be a doctor. But it became obvious that I didn't really do this, right? Right? You can be a doctor. And I was like,
nah, you don't
I
want
can
to
deal
be.
with blood, but it's not even about that. It was like the hours. Like, you don't have a life. I don't want to do that. Thank you. And then
Sure, shades are doctors.
yeah, I did. Thank you guys for all that you do. I mean it. I could have maybe gone down like the economist, accountant route, but again, the ideas of like being stuck in numbers, and I like to talk, as you can probably tell. So they were like, yeah, go be a lawyer. So that was the idea of law school. And so when I was offered this, like, why don't you just join the grad class? You're here, you're the same age as them. And we just found out that you got a first class degree, which you didn't know when you started this role. Like, you're primed for the picking. But I was already sold on this idea of becoming a lawyer. We'd already paid for like first year of law school. But I mean, in hindsight, I'm a bit like, we probably could have
Got a refund or something.
Yeah, or something. Partial, right? We could have even foregone that. And I would have just entered the working world a bit earlier. And now knowing what I know, experience is key.
Yes, absolutely.
And I know that for a lot of our people, diasporans, we sometimes come in and we think, let me get education, get education.
And then you become overqualified,
You become overqualified, underexperienced.
It's a word like overqualified.
Well, the hiring managers do use it. So
you become overqualified, but sadly also underexperienced.
Yeah.
So on paper, they're like, oh, you're beautiful. And then they're like, but how many years of experience do you have? And then they'll tell you, oh, but for this role, we need someone with 5 years or 10 years. In that time, you were in school studying, but studying does not expose you to the real world or the real world of dealing with real life people. Yeah. And actually, there is a benefit in that people aspect.
Getting the balance.
And getting the balance right is so important. And as I graduated from law school 2 years later, the credit crunch happened. So while I was in law school, that's when the credit crunch happened. Okay. 2008. And when that happened in 2008, it changed the landscape of a lot of industries, including the legal industry. And so as I graduated, actually getting training what we call pupillage as barristers was very difficult. I remember the day I got called to the bar, the master of the house said, everybody look at one another. I promise you, out of every 5 of you, only one person will get pupillage. That was what he said to us. It was meant to be a celebration, mind you. Yeah. But that's what he said to us. We were all stood there in our hats, in our wigs and gowns, and he was like, yeah, look around. Only 25% of you will make it. Or 20% of you will make it. Was the message that he was giving. And I'll be honest, I don't think he was wrong. Because cohort, when I think about people who are still in this country, many people went back to their home countries and practice in their home countries. But when I think about a lot of the people that are still in this country, I can think of maybe like 2 or 3 who are still barristers, of which maybe like 1 is super successful, right? And that's even dependent of what you
now you class as success. Yes.
Right? Yeah. And so when I reflect on that, if I could have turned back the hand of time, I probably, bar the friends I made, and I made some lifelong friends in law school, probably would have just taken that job. Yeah. And this is why one of the things I want to drive home is mentorship. Like, talk to people, talk to people beyond your immediate circle. Yeah. Talk to people who have literally done a number of things in their careers and lived it. Because as I reflect back, had I spoken to people beyond like my immediate circle, i.e. my church members who were also Black and diasporans at the time, I probably would have made a different decision.
Yes.
But Dad, it was, I think, and then with girls and their fathers as well, you know, you probably would have just said, oh, my dad would love me to be a lawyer.
No, I think there might have been, like what she said, if she has spoken to other people, she knows her dad really well. She would not, at that point, you would have known how to convince your dad that this is the right way to go. And if you still want me to do law, can do it later. I can always do it later, because everybody would have told you, like, you can do it part-time. You can still be working full-time, do it part-time. And
that's the type of stuff I wish I had actually spoken to people about. Because yes, what stopped me from taking that full-time job and doing it part-time or whatever, because honestly, 2 years after the fact, I went back to the same financial services industry, but this time I was now so obviously credit crunch had happened. By the time I graduated, a lot of organizations had shrunk. Roles didn't exist in the same way. Graduate jobs were a lot tougher to get. Now I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. So now I'm just like, you know what? Let me just get any jobs. I was out of work for 3 months, first and foremost, right? Then it was, okay, fine, whatever I can get, let me just get. So I remember it was the end of 2009. I went in to an organization and they just needed people to come and redact papers. All we were doing, because the thing after the credit crunch, what happened was, like, financial services, the Financial Conduct Authority and the PRA and I'd call them the policemen and women of that industry started to ask organizations, well, hold on a minute, what happened? What happened? And so they were asking for reams and reams of paperwork. And so I went into a specific organization, and all my job was to do was go through and redact everything that was deemed legally privileged. And I did that for about 2 months. And I thought, well, I can't do this forever. And that project rolled off and ended. And then I was on the market again without a role. And then in early 2010, I went into another organization and I just took a low-level HR operations role. Mind you, I had HR experience. I was actually in learning and development.
That way you did the assessment center, or you haven't done the assessment center?
Good. That's really a good. You're drawing me back. You're like, assessment center. Come back.
Further, before the assessment center, I'll say you were 8 years. You faced racism as at 8 years old coming into the UK. And then I'm sure you probably weren't a teenager at that time, 11, you already was looking out for a school where there were more Black people. How did that even happen? How were you so exposed to that?
That's such a good question. And I'm not sure I've ever really stopped to think about it. But I was definitely acutely aware of my race. Now, when I grew up in Nigeria, I wasn't, because I was in the majority, right? Then I came here and someone's making fun of the way I look, fun of my name, fun of my accent. It definitely did something to me. And I'll never forget, so the 5 Black girls in my class in primary school, we used to sit, I think we were like red table or something, and there was like one white girl that used to sit with us. But we used to always laugh like we're the only Black, but we were only like 9 or 10. And to your point, I think that was literally just as a result of the environment we found ourselves in. And when everyone was looking for schools, I was looking for a school I felt at home in. And so at that point, I wouldn't necessarily say I was thinking it had to be majority Black or like super diverse. I think somewhere I felt like I belonged.
You know what moving also is? And that's why I said, I think one of the sessions in the studio, we really should talk about the move.
The move is a process.
The process of it with kids. It's different. They've got friends, they've got where they're coming from, they were the majority.
Yes.
Like it or not. The least they see, you know, as simple as it is the color difference.
And I'd love to, just weigh in on that conversation about the move, because I don't think anyone's ever really stopped to ask me the impact that it had on me. I had an ecosystem. I had a safety net. There was a trajectory school-wise. And in Nigeria, you can skip grades. So I'd already skipped a few grades. There was a trajectory. In my mind, I was going to go to secondary school at a specific age. I was going to study X, Y, and Z. I had my cousins around me, right? Then we did this big move. And, at the time, we moved during the summer holidays. And my mum, I remember I was chatterbox. She don't tell people we're moving. You're just going on holiday. So then you convince yourself as well. I'm just going on holiday. I'm coming back. And then you land here. Firstly, is the cold. Is the cold at Heathrow that I'll never forget. The 31st of August. Yeah. 31st of August. 1993. Whilst it was still summer, for me it felt like winter had hit, because it was like the room temperature. Yeah. Right. So there's that just generic piece. And then you go to school, and I know because I'm born in October, they put me back. So I'd already skipped. But now so then they regularize my schooling, and so I'm sat in class and I'm thinking, I've done this already. More to the point, I've done this, or they teach it to you in a different way. And maths is the classic one I can think of. There's a certain way we teach maths in Africa. Then you come here and they teach you all these tricks. Yes. But in your mind, I don't need I've already learned that if I draw the table this way.
Yeah. Yes.
So even just that piece around moving, and as you were talking, what I was actually looking for on my phone was like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. That it just sets up like the things that as human beings we need. And I think sometimes as parents who are doing the big move, we forget that our children continue to need these things.
Yes, absolutely. Honestly, it's one of the things, and I think I still did put this up on LinkedIn at some point when we made the move, because for me, it wasn't just me. And I understand how it can be moving in Nigeria, moving from primary school into secondary school.
Yeah.
I did have the fear of friends. Will I make new friends? Who would I meet? So now I understood what my kids might actually be feeling. Now I've got to make new friends. I've got to leave the old ones behind. How would they see me?
You guys have a complex mind. When I was in primary school and going to secondary school,
Yeah.
I only had one thing on my mind. I just want to get in and see how it is. I just want to get in. I didn't care about no friends. I was like, yeah.
There's a lot of thinking, and I think really we should consider looking at the move, break it down and let people see this. There's a lot of thinking that goes into that move.
The Maslow hierarchy of needs talks about love and belonging. Yeah. That's it's lower down on the list. Yeah. And deep down within everybody. And so back to your question on, well, how did you know as a child that this is what you needed? I can't say I had language for it, but deep down I knew it, because it's just ingrained in every individual, a requirement to feel like you belong. Yeah. And if you don't feel like you belong, you will be searching out a space for belonging. And I think unconsciously, that's what I was doing. I was searching out a space for belonging, and going to that school to some extent gave me that.
Yes.
Ruth, I like the trajectory of this conversation. We might not dwell on it, but you said something about searching for that belonging. And it's one thing that parents need to look out for. Sometimes you see, African kids, or, they're misbehaving, or they're not behaving as they should. One of the things you probably want to think of, are they searching for that belonging?
I agree.
Pause me right there. Look at socioeconomic status. The average person that's just moved in is probably trying to make ends meet, and then maybe mom is working many shifts, long hours. Dad is working longer hours. How do you think that socioeconomic status, how does it weigh in on BAME?
So when I was applying for pupillage as a young barrister, as the non-practicing, I was still in law school, and I was applying. I looked really good on paper, so I was often invited to interviews and assessment centers. And there are actually two instances. The first one I'll share was an interview and low socioeconomic status. So not really being exposed to much. My mum was a cleaner pretty much the whole time because we had to make ends meet. My dad worked all the hours God sent as a healthcare assistant because we had to make ends meet. So going on holiday, when was that going to happen? When were you going to you went on holiday via the television. That was your like you got exposed to whatever you ended up watching, right? And that's a risk in and of
There's so
itself.
much the TV can take you to, isn't it? Yeah.
Stuff, yeah. So there's that piece. And so I remember even down to like how to dress, I didn't necessarily know. So I had a suit that I bought from round the way, like one of these, as call it yega shops, right? I bought a suit, but you know, when you're going to certain types of interviews,
You wouldn't look the part.
You bought a coat.
Or a suit coat black. Is a suit, is a coat, is a blazer.
But yeah, like there's a way clothes should fit on you.
Yeah.
I wanted to join the bar, right? So understand it was white, it was male, it was
Does it have a shoulder pad?
guys, stop it. But yeah, so but just the way I dress, like I look back now and I'm like, what were you thinking? I wasn't. I thought I'll go in there, I'll have a conversation with them, it will be, but I look back and I was like, yeah, no wonder they looked at you. Like at the time I remember thinking, they looked at me like that because I'm a black girl. Yes, I'm sure it was partly to do with that, right? I'm sure it was partly to do with that. Because I remember walking into the specific room I'm talking about. They were all like they were all like 50 plus.
Yeah.
Okay.
All men. Yeah, all men. Right? And I remember it felt like a dungeon because you had to go down the stairs and it was like a dark room. And I remember thinking, Now in hindsight, I wish I had dressed, because not just look the way you want to be addressed, but look the way where you feel like, no, I know my stuff.
Yes. Confidence. All right. Yeah.
And I think I was completely out of my depth, not in terms of knowledge, but in terms of exposure. And I think this is where oftentimes African parents, especially in the move, we go wrong, is we don't think about how we're going to expose our children to these things. And so we will pick, a career, go and do this career. But we've not thought about what is required exposure-wise to get that beyond education. Right? Education is only a part of it. I have friends that went to Cambridge and they have similar stories of my parents worked round the clock to get me into Cambridge. And then I got there and I was like, what am I doing here? And you know what? That meant that some people flourished, other people sank because there wasn't the...
Based on their resilience, personal characteristics, isn't it?
Is it personal though? Because there's even a part of me that's like, is it really a matter of resilience, or is it a matter of, if you've not been exposed to certain things, you are always going to be on the back foot. And if you're always on the back foot, eventually that's going to affect your psyche.
You're as effective as the information.
As the information you have, right?
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we boil it down with, it's a lack of resilience. Sometimes.
No, I'm not saying it's a lack. I'm saying sometimes, like the people that flourished, probably the resilience helped them because we had different level of resilience.
Right. I see the point now.
We've got to make it.
Okay, fine.
Let's go about it.
I hear what you mean. Like, yeah, actually, to your point, some of the people that I know that did okay in those spaces were probably just more naturally outgoing and didn't care how people thought of them. But if you're already a type of person that maybe you're more in your head, you're more kind of reflective of, how was I received, and you allow that to affect you, then obviously that's going to impact you. And so there is also a part here about knowing your child. So back to the thing you said about parents are often too busy that they don't spend the time to know their children, and
particularly BAME parents, because of the socioeconomic issue we're talking about. So they've moved. They have to provide the food on the table. That's fundamental. And African parents always sees this, one, they're not probably eligible to claim benefits. So they have to work 24/7 to be able to provide for the kids. But also that pride as an African where you cannot beg, so no food bank, or you don't want your kids to see that you're on the dole and think. I'm not encouraging anyone to go on the dole, but that sense of family. I need to provide for my family. That's my fundamental principle, and the way I can provide for the family is get the cash in.
Grandmom, you've got
Aunties,
uncle,
Yeah.
auntie.
Yeah.
even your neighbor around the way, right? The support is there. I think one of the things I just wanted to correct was BAME is just not a term we use anymore because it clusters Black, Asian, and the experiences. And whilst in some cases the experiences can be similar, they're not exactly the same.
The
Yes.
same,
So
yeah.
I think for me, I'm speaking to the Black experience
Yeah.
and Black African, and because that's what I know.
Yes.
And the migration process that I've been through. And I think to the point you were making, actually, we as Black Africans specifically, we have a pride about us.
Yes.
Mhm.
And that pride can sometimes be the undoing because we are so prideful. People at home cannot know what we're going through. And so we're not just working to provide for our family here.
You're working.
You're sending.
There was a generation that worked to provide for back home as well. So the hours they needed to work to provide for the family here was one thing.
Yes.
Then they add the
one that's
excess
going back.
hours. Right? Because I think and this is not, my parents did the best they could with what they knew. And so I love them and I celebrate them for it. But I reflect on if my parents only worked
Yes.
to feed us,
And support us.
they would have had more time for
For
us.
you.
Yes.
Probably even more money.
You better say that one again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? But because there was always this sense of this person back home, that person back home. And my mom, I love her to bits because it even got to a point where my dad was like, I'm not sending any more. My dad was the kind of person that if you ticked him off, I'm cutting you off. He was done. But my mom was like, no, we can't leave them. And my mom has such a big heart.
Family.
Yes.
Okay.
A big
Not
heart. yeah.
family. I'm
Big
not.
heart.
Yeah.
You know,
People that wants to give
no,
Yeah.
when they're
it's not even
struggling.
about, it wasn't even about her
Yeah.
family. That's the funny
Yeah.
thing. Like, as I
Okay.
reflect on my mum's one, wasn't even about her family. It was about other people, right? She just had a big heart. Oh, so person, they've not eaten. Okay, fine. But when you sent the money yesterday, they ate. And the one after, they ate. And the one, like, at what point will they stop eating from you? She's much wiser now. And so now, if someone is bugging her, she'll say, okay, what do you want to do with your life?
Yeah.
And so now she will say, okay, I'll set you up with this
Yes.
and leave me
And
alone.
that's it.
And that's it. But at the time when we were growing up,
Yes.
funds were just being sent for people.
And you did say something. You said that was that generation, but I just wanted to know it's not that generation alone. It's still happening up till now.
Maybe because I'm not part of that.
No,
Yeah, because you're not
exactly.
part. You're not first. You're not first.
But you know what I'm thinking? I think that is another conversation.
Entirely.
by
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
Because you see what you've just said about, mom sending money to this and
Yeah.
saying, there was one is building a massive house. You're
You're never gonna stay. You're never gonna leave it.
I
You have that
know we're
pressure.
meant to move on, but I'll tell you
Yeah.
a quick story. My parents, in the super early years, they thought they were building a house through a family friend of theirs. They thought they had bought land through a family friend of theirs. They thought they had bought, I think it was a duplex or something, through a family friend of theirs. Child, you need to ask me where that house is, because not too long after, my dad, send us the paperwork. Did it ever arrive?
Yeah.
Then it was stories of something happened to something. It belonged to someone else.
no.
Okay, fine, give us the money
Yeah.
back. There's no money.
You
There's no
never
land.
find it. It's one conversation that we'll have another time.
Yeah.
Understanding investments, understanding growing yourself within
Yeah.
the UK.
Let's settle
and
into the
even for
UK
those
and
that-
how
yeah,
those
yeah.
responsibilities back home, how it affects you here in the UK,
Handling
affects
it
your future
really.
as well. Because
Yeah.
either you like it or not, when you don't have time for yourself and your kids, and you think you're helping people back home, yes, we all help. Even up to now, you do,
Yes,
I do.
yeah,
You were still
everyone
speaking about
does.
it in the
Oh,
car this morning.
Yeah.
That cycle is there, and we need to break it at some point, because if we don't, the generations of black people in the UK, especially black Nigerians, is still heavily dependent on that, because except if you're coming to the UK and you get this IT doctor's
But
job.
that continues to impact our socioeconomic standing,
status.
because what
Absolutely.
happens is you're not investing where you should be investing. Now,
Yes.
I'm not saying, as a Christian, I'm not saying you don't help people who are truly in need. And the key is truly in need.
How do you determine
And
who's
then,
truly in?
and then, how do you help them also matters. Are you giving them fish daily,
Or you
or
teaching
you're
them to
teaching them how to fish? And I think that's also and actually being really quick and wise to know the difference, because there are some people who want to learn how to fish. Teach those people versus the ones that don't and they just want a handout. And you have to be able to identify the difference quickly so that they
Yes.
don't suck from you consistently.